Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
I'm going to call this a Mike Beedle quote. Agilize everything.
How did you meet Mike?
Yeah. So Mike was just starting to tell the world about his enterprise Scrum framework and looking for people that wanted to learn it and train it. And I was on a coaching engagement with Harold Shinsato, and I remember just turning to him and saying, Harold, let's talk to Mike. Like, let's support him on this. And so I think I just answered or posted something in LinkedIn or Facebook, I forget which, but like we set up a phone call like the next day. And we started talking, and easily it went over an hour. And I had agreed, like, I'm going to fly out to Chicago, and I'm going to take your first course and your second course. They were offered like in the last week of January.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because there were other people, just kind of in my circle that wanted to go, but like couldn't be there for the very first one. And so they're like, tell me who's there, like who shows up for the first class. And I went way early. It was at this beautiful hotel downtown. And I remember sticking my head in the room and like, thinking like I'll help him set up and stuff, be useful. Because, he's a great guy. And nobody was in there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I must be at the wrong hotel, go and check the room. It's the right room. And I'm thinking like, how is this actually going to happen? Anyway, people started to trickle in, and Michael Herman was one of them. And so we started talking about open space, and then more people came in. I found out, like, you know what? He had gifted this class to other people. Maybe some of them were in transition between jobs. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I paid full freight, by the way, for both classes, and but with the intention of eventually training it. And I started to like realize there are a lot of people that like Mike Beedle cares about and wants to make a difference through in the world. And so anyway, he came, before it's time to begin, and kind of a big entrance. He's bigger than life, and he commands a presence. And I remember him asking me, like, John, you're all into open space. I was part of the open space agility, community at the time. Do you want to open space in the class? I'm like, oh my gosh, like Michael Herman's sitting right there. And he's asking me, absolutely, I would never pass that up. And like the rest of the class, like it was an unfolding of that same kind of attitude and really personable connection that characterized our relationship all throughout. And so we had lunch together that first day. That was when we started talking one-on-one, mostly about like community building and purpose. And I think I remember seeing his children came by with his significant other, and I could see like what a warm like father he is to his children. And there were some other people at the table with us, and just, like everything he would do and say would be so considerate. And I think it was in that moment at that lunch, thinking like, this is the kind of guy I want to be when I grow up. I mean, like really, like he's up to something good, and so inclusive. There were people in my class that like I think that they were maybe restaurateurs or restaurant owners, operators, and they'd seen that there are things that they could maybe use from Scrum in their own organization, their own restaurant, and other people, maybe it's just his infectious energy and optimism. Yeah.
That is awesome. Like and that's like, I've already interviewed several people, and like that's a, reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
In what ways has Mike impacted you? Like, like you said, you want to be, like Mike when I grow up.
Yeah.
What did you learn from him? What do you think, like, when you look at, yourself today, what are some of the things that you maybe could credit to him? And
Yeah. Well, the first thing, and I'm going to call this a Mike Beedle quote, agilize everything.
yeah,
He'd
I
say
remember.
that, and he really meant it, which is like looking at the values of the Agile Manifesto and putting like the relationships, the interaction, your way of being with other people in any aspect of your life is the way of being with everyone in your life. And it's the relationship between you that makes all the difference. And so putting that first at the front of my mind and being with people, like really being with people and letting them know through your way of being that they matter. And that was the biggest impact that Mike had on me. Is after Mike was gone, Facebook, I used to hang out a lot on Facebook. I don't anymore, but Facebook sometimes would give you this announcement, if how many years you've been married or how many years you've known somebody or an anniversary, whatever. And this one, it came up and it said, your best friend, according to like how they've liked your posts,
Yeah.
is Mike Beedle.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like, that's not a coincidence. Like Mike would see the best in you. And the way he would make you feel was that you mattered.
That
Every
is
time.
such a, like, not necessarily skill. I mean, I guess it is a skill because it is that, empathy that, everybody talks today about empathy and all of that, but like to truly embrace it and live it in everything, not just, it is, I've known people like that too, where like they just, you can separate the BS from real stuff, and it is truly that. Enterprise Scrum, I was talking to Rick, and just Enterprise Scrum, and where is it today? Like, and he was describing there's whole, like, who owns Enterprise Scrum, and he's like, I can see parts of Enterprise Scrum everywhere, in a sense of like people, even with business agility and everything. What are your thoughts? I mean, like, as far as what was the potential of Enterprise Scrum, and
Yeah.
in what ways does it live today in other things?
Well, so for me, I think I'd have to look at a timeline. I believe that Daniel Mezek and I and Mark Sheffield announced leadership Scrum after Enterprise Scrum. It could be close. I don't know, but all that I want to say is that in the ways that I have worked with executive teams and that they have embraced leadership Scrum, which is probably just Scrum now with the new Scrum guide. Like, it's another way of saying Scrum. That's the way that enterprise Scrum is living, which is to say Scrum teams everywhere, Scrum teams throughout the entire enterprise. And like not dividing the enterprise by disciplines or, line function silos, whatever you want to call it. And I'm seeing that where I'm working today, we have these cross-discipline game developer teams. And if you would have asked them several years ago, certain teams, they would tell you like, no, there's too many disciplines, to fit on one team. The the artists, there's animators, there's background artists, there's voice and sound effects artists and producers and programmers and all these things. And so already you're over the head count for a Scrum team.
Exactly.
But then it works. Like, you do find ways to have people maybe overlap a little and swarm. And anyway, so I've discovered that, in movie production as well. I was just on the Scrum Alliance page the other day. I don't know if the people who did that heard of enterprise Scrum and that's why they brought Scrum into new fields. But when I see it, I think of Mike and I think of enterprise Scrum, and he was just so like straightforward about that. Like, basically divide your organization by user demographic, by persona, if you will, and have Scrum teams focused on satisfying the needs of the persona. And if you want to have more personas and slice the demographics thinner, then great, have more Scrum teams. But that was his thinking. And I would like to see more business agility in the world in general. I think it's easy to talk about and very hard to do, just like small organizations.
But I think the next 10 years will be about that business agility. Same where like the last 10 years were all about, we talked about business agility, but really it was just getting and trying to understand Scrum. And I think the next 10 years will be trying to understand what business agility is.
Yes.
And then maybe after that is actually, understanding how to do it well, or, the concept that we're talking about, probably what Mike and others have talked about is, that whole structural change, architectural change, the whole cultural change. I think that's probably what we're going to start seeing and tasting more and more, what we've been talking about, what people have been talking about for 30 years or so.
For sure. And one idea there, like, I don't know if, I would imagine some of the people you've talked with, they mentioned subsumption architecture, right?
Exactly.
And in the beginning, like, I thought like, oh, come on, this is like another gimmicky thing, and we're just pulling that out, because it's part of the origin story of Scrum, right? Like the little robots that Jeff Sutherland, I guess, was making in Boston or whatever. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. And when there was this big thing about like, okay, how can we define and explain subsumption architecture to a business person that is not necessarily program robots? And the cool thing about the way that Mike asked that question is he put it out to the community, just like defining what's the definition of enterprise Scrum as a thing. He made it a collaborative process, which I think would be difficult. The community, the enterprise Scrum community was not small at that time. But what I started getting out of it is that there is a certain kind of empirical mindset, something that like we get out of our head, which is what contains our model of how the universe really is, what's the physical reality out there. We get out of our model and then we go and we get the information and we operate and behave based on the information out there. That's my version of what subsumption is. And I think organizations, maybe that goes by a different moniker. Maybe they call it like market mindedness or customer centrism or something like that. And I think that there is a lot of room for organizations to be outward facing rather than inward facing. Yeah.
And that's kind of like not just people that are interviewed for this initiative for and remember Mike, but like in general, like I think there's this everybody's collectively saying the same things, which could be part of group thing, but which could also be part of this true, like I think at the end of the paradigm, like we're going into this new way of thinking, how do we structure organizations, how not just talking but actually doing it
Yeah.
and learning from it and evolving from it. So I think it's, at least I'm excited about what's going to come in. Like even COVID is going to force us to rethink and give us a kick in the butt
Yeah.
to like rethink and redo things. So what other stories do you remember? Do you remember stories that Mike would tell? I mean, anything that you think would be.
So the fondest memory I literally have of Mike was, in his training, it really had this entrepreneurial like spirit. And I don't know whether that was just a function of like the economics of the time. There were, people are between jobs sometimes. But also like there was these big booms, Facebook being a unicorn and acquiring other unicorns. And the curriculum was focused on like the mean time to unicorn is shrinking at like an exponential rate. And so all this is unicorns, that's unicorns. And we would make these business models, business plans, as part of the course. So there's a lot of, what would you call that? Like fractal design to the course. And anyway, so there was the first conference of Enterprise Scrum. We also did an open space, and in the open space, we were kind of just talking about different memes and phrases that come up a lot. And Mike said, he goes, I want to get one of those, what do you call it? It's like, I guess a costume. I'm forgetting the name of them, but, and he goes like, I'm going to, put on like this unicorn, hat or unicorn head and walk up to the mic and say like, so do you believe me now, guys? And it was just the dry pan look that he said it with. And I couldn't stop laughing. Like I just completely like, just my sides were aching. And everybody that was there to hear the joke just thought it was the funniest thing. And we really were saying like, yeah, we got to do this. But like, that's kind of, it's like his undying optimism. He was really serious. He keeps saying to people, like when we'd give our presentations to the rest of the class, like share back, and like, it's like an execution ready, like operational model right there. And he'd go like, if you don't do it, someone else will. Like go out and make that business right now. Yeah. And I think like the people that had over the course of just a couple of hours, made this business plan. They're like, really? Like, could I do that? He's like, yeah, like seriously. And he's like, that's the next unicorn. Like, there's a unicorn, there's a unicorn. And yeah, and so like it was half in jest, but like half really serious. Like he really could see like these incredible, like organizations arising just out of people doing what we're talking about. Like say it, now do it, execute, learn, rinse, repeat. And then I think like him also saying like, you hear me saying like, go do it, but I don't think you really hear me. Like, do you hear me now? Like, what do I got to do? Dress up like a unicorn? And so all of that, like, it's my most vivid memory of Mike is enough humility to laugh at himself, but also the authentic belief that people are creative and people are industrious and people are brilliant and they can.
It's possible, yeah. And like it reminded me, like I've had that feeling in the past, and like I know how it's a fine line. And like I think after a period, at least with my own experience, you lose the will and hope. But I know that like there were certain startups that was part of where it's a small part that made us, or certain things that made us less successful than industry leaders. And like when you taste that, when you see that it is possible, I think that's probably where he was coming from. Like, go do it. It is. And like having people in your life to motivate you like that, and just to say it is possible, I think it's priceless. And I tell always people, like, having mentors and coaches in life, like, at least like expedited my learning journey so much, because like that, like, go ahead, do it. And I'm like, what's the worst thing? Let's do it.
Yeah, that was another thing that so what's the worst thing that could happen? He wouldn't say it that. The way that he would say it is like, it's all funny money anyway. Like, investors, they don't know what to do. They just want to see something grow and get a return. You've actually got an idea. So like, if you just tell them, the organization that you envision, the problem that you're trying to solve, like, they'll throw the money at you, because it's, to them, it's all just funny money anyway. What have you got to lose? Seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is
and
very.
he was coming from that kind of mindset, because he was the CEO of an organization that he actually grew through running Scrum. And I think maybe that's where a lot of his optimism came from, is that like, look, I've seen this actually work in real life. And so I'm not going to just kind of back down and say, well, it was a good idea, or I'm just trying to cheer you up. No, it was real and palpable for him. And he really wanted that reality to connect with people, so that it inspired them to action. Not just like, oh, I got a job, I got certified and it got me a job interview. He wanted to see people really run with it.
Exactly, and be happy. That just remind me of like, I don't know if you've had friends, but I've had, like, I always used to hang out with older kids, and I remember first time I jumped off the cliff, right? And like, it was like, for a lot of them was really like, or at least I remember a specific situation where I think it was like, just, you gotta feel this great feeling that we're feeling, like, and they're like, they're pushing me to experience that because they've experienced it. And I think that's kind of, that's what remind me of people that have seen Scrum work, especially at the enterprise level. Like, they've done it. And I think almost like part of your mission becomes to get others, you get motivated and fulfilled by seeing others actually experience what you experience. And when you said that, that reminded me of that, and there are certain things that I wanted to, others to experience, because what I experienced in my belief in that experience.
Yeah. So there was another moment that, like, for me, it's always just, it's a crystallized moment in time. So I had finished the 2 courses. It was like a Friday night, and the candidate trainers were all in a semicircle around Mike. And this was where he's going to ask us the question, which is, do you feel like you're ready to be an enterprise Scrum trainer? And I don't remember whether I was first or not, but I remember how I felt. And it was like, Mike, I'll be ready soon. There are so many books that you mentioned that are part of the curriculum now, and I can't like teach this course without having read those books. Whether I said that, I don't remember, but like, that was what was going through my mind.
Yeah.
And I remember on the other side of the horn, he's going around the room, and Michael Herman was there. And I hope I'm not misquoting or misremembering, but Michael Herman said, yeah, I'm ready right now. And I could just see like Mike Beedle's eyes light up. He's like, okay, like, we're off the races, go train this class. And that was really his energy, his intent, and his mantra. Like, great. So like, we have all these trainers, and there were classes, people were running them. I think Simon Roberts was one of them. But like, he's like, come on, you guys, like, I want to see more classes. like offer him up and I'll give you the support, like whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And he's like, and if you don't, like, I'll go find some more trainers, because like trainers are supposed to train. And that was a good kick in the pants. That was, I mean, he was taking huge risks financially and with his time and attention and health. And I think it was the right thing to do. I think it's the right approach to take. And the other side of that is so both boisterous. Have you ever seen Mike, or maybe, I don't know if you've heard this, when Mike Beedle wants to get attention in his class, he doesn't like put his fingers in his mouth and blow a whistle. He just goes, guys, 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 and like big booming voice. I mean, he will have you pause and then make his announcement. So very, very very loud volume to get attention. But when he talks about Jeff Sutherland, he gets very quiet, and there's a sense of reverence in his voice. And he told us, I think it was in the training, maybe the trainer, he said, I drove out to Jeff Sutherland's home and I told him, like, this is what I want to do. And I'd like to have your approval. I'd like to know that this is something that you see as being good for the world. And Jeff Sutherland gave me that approval. That's what he told me. And maybe Ken Schwaber too. I'm not sure. But that said a lot for how much gratitude he has towards the people that made Scrum available to the world. And it was years later that I learned the personal sacrifices that Ken Schwaber made. He took out a second mortgage on his home, and he didn't have income for a year as he would go and present Scrum to all the people. And I'm sure that there are more stories that that Jeff Sutherland could relate about how he made sacrifices to make Scrum available for the world. What's important and relevant to me is how seriously Mike Beedle took that throughout his entire life and had gratitude towards Jeff Sutherland.
Well, I don't think it's just Jeff Sutherland. I mean, I think that says a lot about character. I think whoever it was, and it's probably not just Jeff and Ken that he was. It's just it's who he was, probably, and it's just that speaks volumes, in my opinion, about the character and his
a genuinely grateful human being. Yeah, and another thing, like we had dinner at I guess it was one of the conferences, and I happened to be sitting directly across from him at the table for dinner. And it's no exaggeration to say, like, I didn't know much about his family, his children, until that dinner. And he began telling me about, like, his oldest, his son. And obviously brilliant, like, I mean, gifted, brilliant, and a great student. And we probably talked about, his children and how much, like, they were really great children, brilliant children with a wonderful, bright future for like hours. And I just thought, like, this is so great to see such. I mean, a proud father doesn't just describe it. Like, he was really a part of their lives, and they brought him so much joy and so much gratitude. Yeah,
that's I mean, it makes me think, even stories like that, just either it sometimes makes me feel guilty of, like, do I spend enough? Or it's just because it's a personal choice, and, like, for him to do that again, I'm sure he was busy and could have picked to do other things. And I make excuses. I gotta do this. I gotta do another podcast. I gotta prep for this. And it's a good reminder, I think, for everybody, just that we do have a choice of where we focus our time. So.